Good evening. Welcome to Recovering Perfectionist Mama, Grace in Progress. My name is Buffy. I'm a women's lifestyle creator on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, covering topics that concern women. Today, we're going to talk about the emotional cutoff, why we detach to survive, and why it costs us later. Sometimes there are situations where we come at a crossroads and we have to determine, do we go left, do we go right, or do we stay on the same path, knowing what we can expect if we stay on the same path. And the fact that things are going to feel stagnant, things are going to feel unnatural to us, and oftentimes it's going to cause us to endure more pain. Are we afraid of change, or are we open to change? Because at one path, we're continuing to feel like we're being mistreated, we're not valued, our opinions and who we are, people don't really care to know about that, whether that's family, whether that's friends, whether that's distant relatives. We have to decide what our comfort is at that point. Some people may say, I would rather have these people in my life than have to restart over. Some people would say, I've experienced a lot of grief, a lot of pain, a lot of just self-doubt in this situation. And I really don't want to have to figure this out on my own. It's difficult to do. I don't know what to do. And another thing, there's not really a language for this. Cutting off is explanatory, of course, but it's so much more than that. It's so much more than just cutting someone off, because cutting someone off sounds clean. But ultimately, what people realize when they do cut people off, there are still emotions. There's emotions that are painful. There's doubt. There's fear. There's this idea of wondering, am I going to lose everyone else that I haven't cut off? And some people think that people cut people off because they're cold, or they're trying to be manipulative, or they're trying to essentially gain something from that person. Because a lot of people have a hard time acknowledging that anyone would willingly cut someone off. But what they neglect to see is that sometimes people are so overwhelmed and so hurt that they have to let that situation go, or else it's going to consume them. But in trauma psychology, emotional cutoff is a survival adaptation, not a flaw. If you think about it, it's almost like saying to somebody, what you did, like you burnt down your entire house to get out of a situation. And the thing you think about that, if that is the analogy that you're using, is that someone burnt down an entire house to get out of a situation, then you realize that that wasn't a decision that was most likely made lightly. It was probably something that someone had thought of for a very long time. They didn't just pull the trigger immediately and not realize that there were going to be consequences. They probably painstakingly went through the consequences. Maybe they did a pro-con list. Maybe they talked to people that they trusted and said, do you think this is what I should be doing? Because whether you're the scapegoat, whether you're the golden child, whatever you are, whatever role that you were serving in your family just wasn't working for you. Were you the black sheep? Were you the person that everyone took all of their ire out on? Because if you were, then clearly it makes sense that you were not happy with what was going on. So yes, cutting off makes it sound clean. which ultimately, I mean, there's emotions involved, there's people involved. You know, you might have a scenario where you have people who are still involved with the family trying to get you to come back in, and you're really not sure that you want to do that and go back to the whole same song and dance that you continue to go through. There's a moment after enough pain where the nervous system stops trying to feel. Not because it doesn't care, but because feeling became dangerous. And ultimately, when you get to that point, it's almost like you don't trust your emotions sometimes. You have to filter your emotions, not just through your brain, but through your heart. And you may be experiencing somatic symptoms. You may be experiencing some sort of depression, some sort of disconnect, and wondering if what you're seeing and feeling, if your perception is correct, or if you're over exaggerating. And I think that thoughtful people, especially before they make decisions, go through this all the time. But when it's your family or people that you are deciding to break contact off with, it almost ups the ante. It almost makes it a lot more risky, important to make the right decision. And ultimately, your decision about whether or not to cut someone off is completely your decision. I mean, you have to make that decision based on how you're feeling, how the experiences you've had, and when you've had enough, you've had enough. Now, that doesn't mean that reconciliation can't be possible. It potentially can. But again, that's ultimately up to you. And as I've said in previous videos, I'm not the person that would say immediately, hey, cut them off, or hey, don't cut them off. Because guess what? You are the person who knows your scenario. You know what's going on with your life. And so it has to be a feeling that you feel personally and that you are comfortable making. No one can tell you to do that unless they've been in your situation, unless they maybe know your family. I mean, that's a different scenario. So ultimately, we have to define what's going on clearly. Emotional cutoff does not mean that there is going to be a lack of emotion. In fact, if anything, there's probably going to be an abundance of an abundance of emotion, because this is something that is done in seriousness. It's something that you probably thought about for a long time and you're not sure. Or maybe you're 100% sure. You have to trust your intuition, trust your gut, and know and feel that you're making the right decision, whatever that decision is. Emotional cutoff is actually disconnection from emotion for self-preservation, meaning you can no longer take all the criticism. You can no longer take all the blame. You can no longer feel like you're not valued and you're wanted and that your feelings are being honored. When you have people who are continuing to use you and abuse you and mistreat you, it makes you wonder, what am I even doing? Like, why am I talking to these people about my dreams when they don't even care? Why am I expressing things that matter to me? And they say, okay, sure, fine. You overreact. I think you're really immature. I think all these negative things about you. And when you realize that you're trying to put positivity into the world, you're trying to build relationships, you're trying to move forward, and then someone is holding you back. Someone is mistreating you for things that you say. When things that are important to you, you share them and you're made fun of. That's not fair. That's not something that someone who wants to be in a relationship with you would do if they valued you. And you are valuable. You deserve to be treated with respect and love and listened to. So ultimately, emotional cutoff can be related to disassociation, but it's often functional, meaning you have to be able to function in the sense that you're not taking in and absorbing all the negative energy, because negative energy can hurt you just as much as anything else. It can harm your self-esteem, make you feel like you're less than. deride your confidence. And ultimately, you're still feeling, as a person, you're still feeling, just not necessarily in real time. Maybe as you're kind of pulling yourself back a little bit, you're realizing that, this is happening. It often shows up as flat affect, delayed emotion, extreme rationality, or silence instead of engagement. Why the brain does this? Let's talk about the nervous system here. Essentially, our nervous system has two jobs. It has detecting threats and preserving our life. So ultimately, your nervous system can figure out, like spidey sense kind of stuff, when you realize that your nervous system has had certain issues in the past. For instance, when there's going to be some sort of issue going on. And you have 4 reactions. There's fight, there's flight, there's fawn, or there's freeze. I know for the longest time, when I found out my essential nervous system reaction was to freeze. And the reason that I developed that was because I remember constantly being put on the spot by various individuals who would ask me questions, like rapid fire questions. And I would just like freeze like a deer in headlights. And at certain points, I couldn't remember basic information because I was so just like, oh my goodness, this is so overwhelming. And my nervous system just had me kind of like a deer in headlights. And then, the rapid fire questioning just makes it worse. And you're like, it's like, what? And then when you have people like, come on, hurry up. And they're just like throwing questions at you. And you're just like, I don't know, and you're just, that's just kind of the whole thing there. And then also, if you've been in scenarios where your expression led to punishment in whatever way, maybe you were yelled at, maybe you were, certain things were taken away from you, maybe you were bullied by whoever. And then vulnerability led to betrayal. When you actually had the courage to say, hey, look, this is happening. I don't feel comfortable with this, or this is going on with me. And then all of a sudden, it was used against you, like it was your fault. Emotion led to chaos. For instance, I had a relative who would always get on me for crying because they said that I was overly sensitive and that I didn't need to be sensitive. And I understand why that individual did that. But at the time as a kid, it really made no sense to me. And of course, what did it end up doing? It ended up making me cry harder because I was a sensitive person and I still am a sensitive person. But it's painful when expressing emotion is something that triggers someone else. And so the system teaches you, shut it down. That's safer. Express no emotion. Be calm. Be collective. Do what you can do to survive. And ultimately, that becomes the mask and the face that we show to the world, even though we're authentic people. Similarly, growing up, I have always been a person who coexists with my gut feelings and my intuition and how I feel. And I want to be authentic. That is the biggest thing about me that I have done forever. And this particular person would ask me, do you like so-and-so? And I would say, no, they make my stomach hurt. To which point the person would then counter and say, well, can't you just pretend? And I was like, but I don't pretend. I don't want to pretend. I want to be me. No, I can't pretend. I'm terrible at pretending. I'm terrible at lying. I can't do that. Let's talk about an important nuance as well. Emotional cutoff often develops after repeated unresolved relational trauma, which I have done a previous video on relational trauma. And essentially, it's like when you have issues within your family, maybe things that are never addressed, things that are swept under the rug, things that just make you extremely uncomfortable. For instance, I've had scenarios where I've had to represent children of sexual assault where their parent was a partner with that person. And the parent, generally the mother usually, could not acknowledge that their partner had harmed their child. And so they were trying to get their child to not testify or participate in criminal proceedings, and they would even bully and harm their child. That is an example of why unresolved trauma would potentially lead to a disintegration of the family. And the child took a lot of brunt of abuse. There was a case that I had at one point where there was a child who had been abused by mother's partner, and the older sister was expecting this like sweet 16 party or something like that. And they were putting pressure on the child, the younger child, to just don't. Like, this is my sweet 16 party. I need it. I want it. You're not going to ruin this for me. So then you have the other pressure of the other siblings putting pressure on that child who's actually been abused. So the other thing is, it's especially common in family systems. We know that, we see that, in institutions, and then high stakes public scrutiny. So you think about like all the stuff like going on, like a true crime kind of thing going on. We don't need to sensationalize a victim whose grief was called wrong, right? For instance, I know that I've done cases. For instance, I know a lot of people had issues with Darlie, for instance, and the whole silly string thing. I think that sometimes people are so into what appearances look like and how things should be done. And sometimes I think people just do what they feel, and other people may misread it for whatever reason. And her silly string party that she had for her child, a lot of people felt that showed her guilt. Again, it's easy to judge others when we're not in that situation. And that's what I say. I say that, her grief was wrong because she had silly string, right? But in her story, I believe she had said that her kids liked silly string, right? So she, in her mind, thought that would be okay. Of course, the prosecution used that, and it could potentially be used and misconstrued. Again, do I know her intent about what happened? Absolutely not. I don't. I don't know Darlie. I don't any of that. But I will say that it is really hard sometimes to judge someone else's heart. And that's what I personally would say myself. Or a witness whose detachment damaged their credibility. Because it's like, okay, well, why are you so detached? But what people don't understand is trauma does different things to different people. Different people have different reactions to that. And so we cannot judge someone based on their reaction because we may not know that person. Different people react differently. To some people, they've been told that crying is weakness, so they're not going to show that. Some people have more of an angry reaction, right? Some people detach because they have maybe post-traumatic stress disorder or something like that has caused them, because they've experienced so much pain in their life, that their experience is to have a flat effect. Does that mean that they didn't experience trauma? Does that mean that they're not hurting? No, everyone deals with things differently. And then also you have a perpetrator whose flat effect confused the public, right? They're just stone-faced. I didn't do anything wrong. I don't know what's going on. I really don't want to talk about it, right? I mean, that could make you think that person doesn't care. Or an institution that emotionally disengaged after harm, right? Maybe there was a scenario where in a jail someone was killed, And the institution's like, yeah, really, it's not our fault. I mean, that's what happens with inmates. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Now, that would definitely strike people as wrong. The things that matter most here are the pattern. What the public often reads as coldness is frequently a nervous system that learned that feeling was unsafe. And for people who've experienced a substantial amount of trauma, like the example of the relative I gave you, they learned that feeling was unsafe. So they learned to stuff and block emotions is what they learned. And they learned that that was the safe way. So ultimately, we're talking about, being the perfect victim. And that creates an illusion of control, meaning you have control over your feelings. You have control over potentially feeling like you're keeping yourself safe. You're keeping yourself protected. And then you have the narrative certainty, meaning you control the narrative, right? You're not weak. You're not a victim. You're a survivor, right? You don't let things happen to you because you're in control. But control ultimately is kind of an illusion, unfortunately. I relied on control for many years. I relied on perfectionism for many years. Hence why my username is Recovering Perfectionist Mama. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, right? I know many of you have as well. Because I learned that if I was perfect and if I was agreeable and I was easy to take care of, then that meant that more people would love me, right? I was taught to be nice as a kid. You know what it got me? It got me bullied. It got me mistreated. I know that now. And when I see that my daughter is being bullied, it really upsets me because I don't do bullies. And I told her, I said, don't be a doormat. Mommy was a doormat. You don't have to be a doormat. You be strong. Show them who they're bothering because you are strong. I'm not saying to bully them back. I'm saying to be like, leave me alone. I'm not who you want. Leave me alone. Why society misreads cutoff. This is about perception and power. Society expects pain to perform, meaning they want to see the tears. They want to see the breaking down. Maybe they even want to see you faint. I don't know. But that is so unrealistic because a lot of people are not wanting to be performative when they're in pain. They're not wanting people to see them vulnerable and weak and sad and falling apart. I know for me, with the person who did not want me to cry and do things like that, I literally experienced a lot of shame for a lot of years for crying. I was always concerned that people were looking at me when I was crying, and I was very, very self-conscious about that. And so you got to think about your impact on other people sometimes too, because, it's like people experience things differently. People are more sensitive than other people. And it's almost like emotion becomes a credibility test, right? It's almost like the scale, the sliding scale. Like if you don't cry enough, like you just have like one tear, and you're trying to like rub your eye and make yourself cry more. I think she's being fake. Okay, well, but then if you like are flooding with tears, oh yeah, that was way overdone. I mean, literally, it's like people are like giving you a score, like an Olympic score based on like your emotion, like how you're crying. Okay, she just had like one tear. Oh wait, she had like a whole face full of tears. Like, I don't know. I think she shouldn't have gone like the full board. No. Like she needed to kind of stay in the middle there. Really? Those who don't display it correctly are punished. Again, let's talk about the media, how they frame stuff, right? People who are crying and remorseful, we trust them. People who are cold and like aren't reacting and their face isn't conveying anything, like they're just like stone-faced, they're heartless. They're heartless. I bet she did it. I bet she committed that crime. Look at her. She's not even doing anything. And then the institutional response, everybody's like, oh yeah, she's got to be guilty. I mean, there's no tears, there's no remorse, there's nothing. And then we talk about the family scapegoating, right? The fact that there are certain families where people pick the person that they feel like is most likely the one that they can pick on, the one that they can accuse, the one that they can gang up on. How terrible to be that role in the family. And if you are the family scapegoat, you know it's not a fun place to be. You didn't do anything to earn this. You just drew the unlucky straw. And something in you likely triggers something in your family, not because you're a bad person, not because there's anything wrong with you, but people are looking for someone to take things out on sometimes, I think. And I've been that person a lot of times. I'll be 100% honest. I've been that person a lot of times. If you've seen my podcast on When Family Turns Against You. The cost of staying cut off. Costs can include inability to access joy. Maybe because you don't feel complete without your family. And ultimately, you have to decide what is most important to you, what you're willing to go through, what you're willing to not go through. Maybe you're going to struggle with confusion about identity. Who am I now that I don't have all these people around me that I've always had? These are normal feelings, right? They make sense. But at the same time, you want to be treated with the love and the respect that you deserve because you're a human being. You deserve to be treated correctly. You deserve to be given the love that you give others. And that's what's important. And ultimately, if you have someone in your family who's willing to talk to you and listen to you and say, look, I just want to be treated like a normal person. I want to be given love. I want to be given respect. I want to be listened to and not made fun of and not scapegoated. That's all I'm asking. I'm asking maybe to start over if that's something you want. If you're not into that, that is your complete ability to say no. Just kind of throwing ideas out here too. Also, maybe sometimes difficulty with intimacy, feeling like you're able to share things with them. Hey, look, my husband and I were thinking we want another baby, or, I'm thinking about getting married, or we're talking about getting engaged. Well, what do you think? Do you think that would be used against you? That's kind of the whole intimacy, like rebuilding the relationship if you're into that. Also, living in constant management mode, like what can I share? What can I not share? What's going to happen if I do X, Y, Z? And then also surviving without actually feeling like you're living your life. Because ultimately, you deserve to live a great life. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be respected. You deserve to be shown love and give love to others. And so a key truth, what protects us during trauma can limit us afterwards if it's never revisited. And ultimately, working through trauma is hard. And it's something that, we do day by day, minute by minute sometimes, depending on what you're going through and the things that you're struggling with. But let's talk about returning to feeling without romanticizing. Feeling does not come back through force. It comes back through safety. When you are in a safe situation, you're going to feel so much better. So whether you stay with your God-given family or whether you decide that you need to step back for a bit, permanently, temporarily, whatever you decide, know that there is an option. Safety before solution. Safety is so important for your nervous system so that it knows that you're safe and that you're not harming you're not causing harm to yourself in any way, and you get out of fight or flight mode. When my grandmother passed away back in June, I went through fight or flight mode for probably about 6 months. And then around New Year's Day, I had a traumatic incident in which I went back into fight or flight mode. And I found myself, because I literally was hit with like a big blow, just a huge blow that just like tore me to pieces. Like to the point that from that moment, like the 30th of December, I started shaking, like visibly shaking, because the news that I had received was just so like, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I know that that is like a cliche, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I literally was like visibly shaking. And so when people would see me, they would say, oh my gosh, like you're visibly shaking. And I was like, I know, I'm just so stressed out right now. Like I've got so much going on and I just can't focus, like it just literally knocked me on the ground. I've since overcome that, thank goodness. But when you're in a period of like fight or flight for a period of time, it does take a lot out of you. Thankfully, we've had some cold weather here where I'm from, and I've been able to kind of rest and kind of get through some things. And I feel 100% better. But it's like when I was able to tell my body, look, you're safe, you're good, you have people around you who love you, it's good. Also, it comes back slowly. And it comes back almost unevenly with pauses. So just prepare yourself for that. So let's talk about, I talked about the framework CANA, which is like, the first step of that is clarity. So we need to talk about the cutoff, right? I have decided to make a clean break from XYZ. And then the next thing is you want to be aware of your body. Are you clear in your mind? How is your heart racing? Are you sweating? Are you having racing thoughts through your head? Noticing your body cues are really, really important. And then your nervous system. You need to regulate before emotions. And then your action, which is step 4, is going to be small, contained re-engagement. So that could be something like deep breaths. It could be an affirmation. It could be journaling. It could be writing a poem that you know, writing a Bible verse that you know, maybe the hook to a song. Could be as simple as taking your shoes off and walking in the grass. It could be repeating a line over and over that calms you down. Healing isn't removing the cutoff. It's learning when you no longer need it. So let's talk about the integration. Let's close here by saying that emotional cutoff wasn't a failure, especially if you've done what you feel like you need to do, you're comfortable with your decision, or maybe even you want to make it a trial decision, whatever you want to do. Again, not telling you what to do because I don't know your situation specifically, and it's really not my business because I'm not in it. But I do want to say that, emotional cutoff is not a failure if you are comfortable with your decision. And it was wisdom under pressure, meaning you were given pressure because you had constantly been dealing with these issues for a period of time and you don't really see any other way. And you should know that your decision deserves respect, not shame. The goal isn't to feel everything. The goal is to feel when it's safe to feel. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that this gave you a little bit more information and some maybe potential guidance. I know that this probably wasn't an easy decision for you, nor would I expect it to be, but know that I wish you healing. I wish you hope. I hope that you get the life that you want and that you deserve, and that you get back the love that you give to so many. And I'm rooting for you, truly. Thank you for tuning in to Recovering Perfectionist Mama, Grace in Progress. My name is Buffy, and I want to say that I'm thankful for every single one of you who take the time to tune into my podcast and offer me encouragement and help make my dream come true in some way. And I hope that you are enjoying the podcast. And if you have a topic or something that you want me to go into, feel free to drop it in the comments. Thanks again and have a great night. Bye-bye.